Welcome to the Veterans Psychedelic Discourse. We are a group that advocates for safe and responsible exploration of mental health treatments, and this is not a platform for the solicitation of illegal substances. Today, our guest is Feringa. She was a medic in the Army. She's the director of Hippie and a Veteran Foundation, and is an advocate for decriminalization in Washington through Reach Washington. So without further ado, please welcome Feringa. How's it going, Lauren?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So there's a couple things that you have your hands in as far as entheogens and whatnot. I'm curious on kind of how this whole path started. Would you mind giving us a little bit of your history and just how you got here in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I've been using psychedelics since I was 16. So I guess I joined the military having already done these things. But I'd actually done mushrooms the day before I went to MEPS to ship out. So I had a really good time at basic training. Like I was in that nice little bloom, just had psychedelics, and I'm like, oh, everything is beautiful, and it was great. So made for an interesting integration space. Um, I use psychedelics periodically throughout my service because I knew I'd always feel better if I was dealing with stuff. Um, and then I got out in 2018, and then had a kid, and psychedelics became a huge part of my PTSD healing experience and postpartum experience. And I initially started our organization to help access like SGBs. I didn't really think I could really do anything when it came to psychedelics. As a medic and having worked in like these professional spaces, like I didn't know that I could do all of this. And then I kind of got thrust into it by chance after getting involved with some psychedelic communities here in Washington State, and then decided to go after doing decriminalization for the whole state because just seemed like if I couldn't, SGBs are stellate ganglion blocks. They are a chronic pain injection that can actually also help with PTSD symptoms by turning off the fight or flight response. So my organization specifically works on fundraising for SGBs, but all of our education and advocacy efforts are on psychedelics. It's better for the federal government that way too. But so yeah, I ended up, now I'm doing decriminalization for the state. I work on advocacy here on legalization efforts at our capital in California. And then whenever I can, I've only been able to go out to DC once, but I expect to go back out again for the Breakthrough Therapies Act, which will be changing the scheduling system.
When did you get first exposed to the SGBs? Typically, like with the exposure to psychedelics, I would imagine that'd be an easy one to kind of just lean on. How'd you get kind of in touch with that and start to seeing the efficacy of that?
Yeah, so I was about like, I don't know, 5-6 months after I'd had my son. I wasn't experiencing postpartum. I never experienced postpartum depression. I did experience I didn't have a lot of depression with my PTSD symptoms. It was more like I was agoraphobic. I was in some spaces hallucinating. And this happened months after I had my child. I think that something else triggered in my body, and I couldn't get my stuff under control. I started microdosing. And at that point, I wasn't as comfortable in understanding how safe. I already knew mushrooms were safe, but I was breastfeeding at the time, so I was really scared about what I'm putting in my body and I don't respond well to pharmaceutical mental health medications. I just like my body adapts to them way too fast. And so I started microdosing, but someone sent me a message and sent me the article for stellate ganglion blocks at the Long Beach VA. And then I watched the 60-minute interview and I'm like crying watching this. Like, if they can turn my fight or like, that's the only thing I'm feeling is I'm feeling like I did a line of cocaine. Like, I'm like, whoo, like crazy, except that like I shouldn't feel like this. Um, and I saw that, and it was watching other service members and veterans talk about having their fight or flight response turned off. And I was like, that's what I need. I happened to have, this is the cool thing. I happened to have moved back home to Long Beach. Well, I'm from Norwalk, California, but Long Beach isn't too far away. But I moved back there to have my son so I could be around my family. And that happens to be the VA that was doing all the studies on SGBs. And so I went into the VA after I saw that. I had made an appointment. I go in and I'm like, I need to have this shot. And they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, we need to find out because it's being done in this hospital. Like, I was like, here's a 60-minute interview. It's here. You can't say that it's not. But nobody would help me. I went to the mental health. In the end, I was literally going into offices throughout the VA trying to find them. And no one would help me. I finally had to end up going to the emergency department mental health space. And they'll like, we'll help you get there. And so they did an intake or whatever, but I was really scared, like doing this. Like, I'm never going into inpatient, like you're not having control of me. So I was kind of scared. It took me a hot minute to be able to like submit to like telling these people what I'm feeling like. I don't want to tell them I'm hallucinating and I'm taking care of my baby. Like, I am, a BIPOC person. My mother was also, taken away, or she was adopted out. Like, I have some generational trauma surrounding, um, separation of mother and child. And at that point, I was terrified. And I finally got a hold of the research department. They were like, we'll get you this shot. Absolutely. And I was like, can I take it? I'm breastfeeding. And they're like, absolutely. It's just like basically lidocaine. And I'm like, oh, and I'm a medic. So I'm like, okay, this is starting to make so much sense. I also had so much pain like up here. And I'm like, just now it blows me away. But I went in and they got me into their clinic and they gave me my shot 10 years on the 10-year anniversary of when I lost my first guys in Iraq. It was like everything was perfect. Like, it was just like meant to be. And then after that, I was like, we all need these. Like, if I had known that I would still be in, I wouldn't have gotten out of the military. I would have probably like continued doing my job and gotten to retire. And I didn't get that chance. So that's how I got into SGBs. And then I started microdosing a lot because I was like, oh, that's so safe. And they create similar relief, not as long lasting as like an SGB, I think, or going deep into the medicine, but microdosing and that paired together was just like the dream team.
Sure. Yeah. And you definitely, well, like you were saying, how you had some exposure to psilocybin prior, so it's like you already kind of had like a practice, so must have been really helpful when you're coming out of the military and struggling with this, having that insight already instead of getting introduced to the concepts and trying to figure it out for yourself. That must have been just a kind of like a blessing, just to be prepared totally in that way.
Absolutely. Like being like I walked into the space trying to heal, having already been a part of it, basically it had been a part of my life for 2 decades. And so it was just like, okay, I already know these make me feel good. And actually, after I got my SGB, they asked me, what did it feel like? And a lot of people say it feels like you like took your backpack off and just like have all this relief taken off your shoulders. And sure. I was like, it feels like I did mushrooms yesterday. That was my response to them. And then it also clicked in my head when I said that. And I was like, Huh, maybe the mushrooms clearly were, we were onto something this whole time. We weren't just club kids. Like, you know, we were after relief.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I haven't been exposed to SGBs very much. Brian recently has been getting that type of treatment at the Long Beach VA, and just after learning about it in that time, it's really encouraging. I'm really happy that you're helping people be able to get that treatment alongside, doing all the different advocation, even if it's not psychedelics. If it shows efficacy, then if it's working, then shoot, then everything, anything and everything that could be used. I'm just happy. I'm just happy that you're making efforts into making that more available.
Yeah, it's great. I think they're yeah, they're really great. And I think they pair well together and they should I think anything now that I see that does similar things to the body, like mindfulness or cold water therapy or whatever, I'm like, now I just know like it changed the way I view PTSD and how we treat a lot of things.
Yeah. So, at what point did you decide to kickstart Hippie and a Veteran, and was it after or before you had that exposure to SGBs?
Um, I after I had the shot, like I already had, we had like our, I did like adventure social media, like like we lived in a van and like traveled around and did all that. So I started putting stuff out on social media. One of my um, fellow female veterans was like, document what you're doing. And I mean, because she has PTSD too, and wants to know like, how are these things working for you? But she was still in the military. So I started documenting it initially for my sisters in arms that were still in, that were asking me what I was doing and how I had gotten relief. Um, and so I just started making videos. And then I got connected with some politician that was trying to push the Treat PTSD Act, which would have directed all VAs in the nation to provide SGBs. And so we kind of joined on a coalition with them. But as soon as like COVID, BLM, and they were very anti all of that stuff, I got dropped off of everything. And so that was pretty disappointing. And then they stopped doing all of the advocacy on that bill and working on it. And they instead turned into the hot mess that we saw in politics. They didn't care. They were veterans too, and they didn't care about getting this bill pushed. They just dropped it and just cared about going after whatever their party wanted them to do. And I understand like that's a way to stay afloat in politics, but so that happened. And then I went for a run. I took a microdose and I went for a run on a hike one time. And this is super silly. Um, and that's not silly. But I was running and I'm thinking like, how do I do this? Like, how do I get this? Like, these people aren't going to help. Like, how do I do this? And I went running and I barefoot run. And a freaking deer came running by me. And I'm like, that's badass. And I'm also on mushrooms, so I'm like, oh my god. And I wasn't like a lot. I wasn't hallucinating. A freaking deer really came by me. My husband was behind me. He saw it. But I was like, this is epic. And I don't know what it is. I was just like, we're doing a nonprofit. And I was like, when we came down from that hike, I told my husband, I was like, I want to start a nonprofit. Like we have, if I can go to school and learn how to do these, and then I can save people in a few years, or I can be a nonprofit and just be a medic and just do this. I've done marketing for the government before. I was like, I can figure this out. And so then that's when we started our nonprofit.
And how long till you got involved with Reach Washington? Was it from as an
Um,
extension from like your work that you were doing with your nonprofit?
yeah, like initially I had been called upon for a psilocybin legalization initiative in Washington State to come help because they wanted to use my reach um, and my content and my veteran status because I also served in the state. And And so they asked me to come in and help and do their speeches or whatever advocacy stuff they needed. But that went a little south and a little disorganized and disrespectful. And so I called up all these decrim people that I knew, and me and another person who's a professor of Indigenous Studies here at Evergreen College in Washington State, Haley Maria Salazar, and she and I reached out to Decrim Nature. They brought all the people that they knew in Washington State onto a meeting and a call, and they introduced me to everybody, and everybody that wanted to continue working on an initiative, they stayed there with us, and we started making regular meetings, and it rolled into Reach, and that was, I think, in 2022.
What is like the range of things that you have involved with your nonprofit, Hippie and a Veteran? What are the different things that someone could get involved with? Is there services that they could sign up for? I'll leave a link also to your site here in the chat.
Yeah. So initially I was like, with our nonprofit, we can like cover these shots, and that's cool. But they're really expensive. They're like $1,500 a pop unless you're getting a discount. And I just say 1,500 as an average. I've been monitoring the prices of these. They went from like $300 to $500 to 15 to $2,000 as popularity for PTSD kicked up. And so I couldn't keep up with pricing. So to me, it just made almost like, I was like, how do I find money with little bits of money? So you can also get these on a pain management consult through the VA. You have to discuss with your medical provider to not put steroid in it when they do it, but you can get them on a referral. The problem is the referral is only 6 months. But so that's been one of our main efforts, is helping people get them covered through the VA in states where they're not being provided. We have a national template on them. I do education, we do speeches and whatnot with our Washington State's Department of Veterans Affairs, educating them about SGBs. I have some interviews and stuff with like the actual researchers that do this. And I just have been a lot of advocacy on how do we get this into the VA. And one of the big things was demand, creating a demand. So here in Seattle, I think that the demand pushed them to have SGBs, and they are now providing SGBs out of their pain center. I haven't seen someone actually get it done, but I have a few people that are scheduled. So we know that they're already happening. So that's a little bit of the advocacy part. And then, working on access, connecting people with access, connecting people with resources, psychedelic resources, as many as we possibly can. I'm going to get a lot of questions about resourcing or whatnot, or just using, because I mean, people can get their own mushrooms. Like, and I'm really big on decriminalization. So I do a lot of like consulting with especially medical providers on how they can support their veterans. And then when veterans are in need of resources, like there's plenty of people out here that are happy to help people get cultivation kits or get them up and running. And we have a really large network of people that do all that kind of stuff. So a lot of connecting, and we are going after some federal grants to cover SGBs, if I can figure out the damn government grant system. But it's kind of hard navigating when you're talking about psychedelics. But we are trying to get back to covering them again. It's just, I want to be able to cover a lot, and also provide the VA with that data on how effective they can be when you actually pair it with supportive services and integration stuff, which also ropes in microdosing. So yeah, I don't know if that's kind of like a blanket of what we do.
I'm wondering, what are some of the biggest obstacles you've run into so far trying to get this message out there and trying to connect veterans with services?
Okay, well, I mean, I do a lot of stuff on social media. And so I get a lot of reach, and we find a lot of people that need help through that. But parameters of talking about suicide, not just psychedelics, but specifically suicide and suicide prevention, is very limited on social media. Like, to click on a page that talks about, like, that has suicide prevention in the name, like the militaries, I was a suicide prevention coordinator for the National Guard a few months ago until I became too pregnant to work. And people don't even see our stuff if you're talking about suicide prevention. Like, the actual target people don't see it because these marketing spaces, social media, are limit what people can see. So that's been pretty hard. But also, like, people don't want to believe it. Like, it's like people want to believe that, oh, you can, especially when you have a lot of people that have PTSD that are running suicide prevention management spaces, like higher ups within the VA or whatnot. Nobody wants to believe that they've been hurting people. And that's exactly what's been happening. Like, we are over medicating people to, like, bad extremes. We're giving people stuff they don't need and then giving them more pills and pills on top of it, and calling that medicine. But people don't want to believe that they're hurting people. And those people with ego, but also deep down, not wanting to believe that they could be the part of the problem, they really put themselves in the way. Like, I try to get on, like, the state's, like, suicide prevention meetings. They just, like, do everything they can to keep me out. While I was the prevention coordinator, they had to let me in. But now that I'm not working, they won't even respond back to my emails. Like, they don't, and it's crazy, because the amount of people that have had these shots, but nobody wants to charge forward. I don't know. People don't want to be the one that shakes the boat, or whatever. I don't know, whatever term to use.
It almost seems like there's a reluctance with practitioners to use existing medications for new therapies. Like, if you're not using some kind of new medication that's got a new cost associated with it for research and production, like, it's just lidocaine. What are you talking about? That can't be a treatment, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. There's this weird vibe behind it. I posted some literature while you were talking earlier. I was down at the VA in Long Beach in January, and this is the literature that they're handing out right now. The first one kind of describes what the stellate ganglion block is, what it does, just in layman's terms. And then the second one is a research project they're actually doing right now. I'm hoping that this will. So the issue that's going on right now is it takes like 2 months to get into the program for your intake for an SGB. And the problem is you can't get community network services for it because it's not approved by the FDA. So my hope is by them doing this research, this is the beginning of the process of them verifying the validity of the approach. So the FDA will be able to get approval, but even more so than the VA providing the service, that means that in the community, we can begin to get the service as well. Because there's people down here that do stellate ganglion blocks that'll see you like that week. You know, it's just, we need to get them connected with the community network for the VA. So a lot of potential
Exactly.
coming.
I like that you say that. Like, one of the things on our website is, like, get involved, like newsletters or whatever. But the other thing is for providers, if you provide SGBs, sign up to be a damn VA healthcare provider in the community. One of the main things is that they don't have people that will sign up and work with the VA. So, like, there are, even if the FDA did not approve these, if we had more community care people that were providing SGBs, even if they're doing it in the PTSD technique, the technique doesn't matter. They can still provide them. Every single doctor can do any type of technique they want when they're doing their work. So any of those ones that are providing PTSD could actually sign up and take people under pain consults. That's how we've been getting them covered forever. But the problem is we don't have enough providers willing to do that. And then it also makes to the VA, it's like, oh my God, how are we going to get in contact with all of these people? We need all these providers to want to sign up with us. So that's the other big hurdle outside of just FDA approval, is how many people are going to want to sign up with the VA when the VA has such a bad track record of paying their bills on time when it comes to community care consults. But the big thing, we really need that FDA approval, because PTSD consults can be for 2 years. versus a 6 month referral right now for pain consults. But I've actually been in contact with that team doing that. We've had a few meetings with them a little while ago. Well, I think sometime last year now, because we're in 2024. But we tried to point, as many veterans as we could towards that. It's just crazy that, because to me, they did a research study 4 years ago. I just got on the tail end of that one, and that's why I'm here today, and we're still waiting on research. Like Sean Mulvaney and Dr. James Lynch, they've been doing these studies for like the past 15, 20 years. And they've been doing on veteran and military populations, because they're like special forces doctors. And we have been doing these, and relief for anxiety has been going on and documented for the last 100 years. So we have everything they need. It just sucks that we still have to keep forking forward more research, similarly to psychedelics, I guess.
I think the thing that stood out to me when I went there is I was kind of troubled by the amount of data that they were gathering beforehand and after. In other words, the only thing that they sought after was your level of anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. And one of the first things that stood out to me was how useful it would be if you would just hook each of the clients up to an EEG machine in order to get an effective read on their brain waves before they have the shot, and then after they have the shot, so you could have a bit more of a proof of concept than just a subjective scale of 1 to 10. But it just seems like there's no appetite for it. And it's like, without that appetite, I don't know how you intend to do credible research. Everything's so subjective. And it's like, yeah, it was a good experience personally, but like I was kind of troubled by the research I saw being done.
Because it could be so much better. It could be so much more robust. Like, why not? You have literally you have the money to do this. You have the teams to do this. You could be scanning people. You could be doing so many other physical diagnostic things, especially like PTSD long-term causes us to have like heart issues, because our bodies are operating this high. To watch the difference in the tachycardia people are experiencing prior, and seeing that afterwards, and watching this treat actual like heart conditions that we thought were heart conditions, but they were really just your body's freaking exhausted. So of course your heart's like working extra hard, like to pump, all this blood through these like tightening constricted blood vessels. And no, there's so much physical data they should be collecting, and they're not. You're right.
I worry that your observation about the suicide prevention lines may be true for this as well, that the VA in Long Beach has managed to get a foothold providing these services. They've expanded from one doctor to another team of anesthesiologists. And so they're just trying to protect the ground that they've already gained, rather than trying to do research that would maybe potentially send this out of their hands into the community, where they'd essentially be giving away what they've created. You know what I mean? So that's something that worries me. Like, to create the bureaucracy creates the need for the bureaucracy,
It does. No, because once the people get a hold on it, they get really protective.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Like, if we actually care about people, just a few good people getting together, speaking out, a few good medical providers getting out and speaking out and sharing information. Like, are we here to save lives or not?
Yeah.
Like, also, I like to say research is not meant to dictate medical practice. It's just meant to inform it. And we're at this point where research is dictating everything we do, which is like, I don't want it. It's not, research is bad, but research is to inform, not to tell us what to do. And if we know that this is helping people and it can't hurt people, it's been used for 100 years. Like, why not?
Yeah. Yeah, well, Alex and I were talking about that before the show. It seemed like around the turn of the last century, there was kind of like this concerted effort to get away from holistic homeopathic approaches and get more into like petroleum-based medicines, I guess is a way to put it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when we're looking back and we look at all of the different things we're experiencing now with our health, and we're going to pretend like it's not the way we medicate ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, the control is a problem. like really bad. And I see like, so like I said, I can't do anything about SGBs like on a medical level. I can only do it from a patient level. But with psychedelics, mushrooms are $10 a gram. Like what, you know, is at the most, like these things are cheap, they're accessible, people can grow them themselves. Like this is the one way that we can kind of like, fuck you to the man. And that's why I'm so big into decrim, because like I can't fight money, but I can teach people how to grow. I can teach people how to microdose. I've been doing, you know, mushrooms for a really long time. Like that stuff's easy for me to teach people to do, and that teaches people to help themselves instead of being dependent on a system, which is the other thing, system dependency.
Yeah. Just to segue a little bit, grateful for the opportunity to have you here because you do provide like a very unique perspective. Obviously, it's your own, but kind of that as a female veteran. And I'm wondering like kind of some of the unique challenges that you've seen female veterans facing, or maybe just to create some awareness. So maybe other veterans in the community could maybe have a little bit more understanding of, you know, maybe what we're collectively going together or going through together.
Yeah. Well, for one, I think, and I'm, as far as I know, I am the only founder of an org that is doing psychedelic legislation that is this out and loud about any of this. That is a female. And that like gets missed all the time. Like, so like people don't understand like the struggles that I'm dealing with aren't just I'm up against, you know, the FDA or, you know, whatever. I'm also struggling as a female, a small one. I'm pretty tiny. And walking into spaces, I don't get treated the same as other veterans. I've gone into support and critique psychedelic legislation here in the state of Washington and not been thanked for my service. But as soon as, you know, a guy comes up and is like, I was into war for like 2 years. And I'm like, I was at war for 4 years and I was a fucking medic. I've seen fucking hell and life. Like, we don't get treated the same. And like, we go through this similar shit that all of our guys go through, and we come home. We're not treated like we're the combat veterans that we are. Like, and then we make babies on top of that. Like, and then we're like physically making human beings with our bodies, which is like a whole addition added on to that. And we deal with way higher rates of chronic pain and fibromyalgia associated with our mental health. Well, of course, and now that I understand PTSD and SGBs and like all this stuff, it all makes so much sense now. But SGBs were initially used to treat women experiencing hot flashes. And it was also documented, like I said, over 100 years ago as treating anxiety. And it's been like that. But that's the thing, the shot could help women to begin with, but it wasn't important enough. So it wasn't just like female veterans, like medicine alone. Like when they were doing studies for SGBs, I'm asking, did you have any moms in this? Right? We don't know. How many women did you have? And they're like, I don't know. I can't tell you that. I bet if you had women in the study, you would have fucking just said it. And then I said, how many breastfeeding women did you have? And they were like, none. And I was like, so I'm the only one. I'm the only woman that's been studied, that's been breastfeeding, dealing with PTSD. Like, no one cares. They don't care. they don't understand how much relief this can provide. So that really irks me. I've been in distress once when I got pregnant and kicked out of the VA because I was trying to get mental health services. I got kicked out because I had my kid with me at another appointment 2 weeks after I miscarried and was dealing with a lot of shit. So, but if a guy comes in with their kid, all the women are going to be like, oh, let me help you. But the only people that care about me are my brothers when I'm in the VA. When I have my kid, I've had groups of men like in the lab. They're like, we got your kid, it's okay, well, we got your kid. Would never feel safe like letting people watch my kid, but in that instance, so I could get my blood drawn, like they go out of their way to like make way for me. And so I don't, like I said, we were talking before, if it hadn't been for Zach Skiles, I wouldn't have gotten thrust into these like bigger federal like advocacy groups had it not been for my brothers lifting me up and being like, we need this perspective here. So as much bad as there is, it's also really cool to get to see y'all lift us up, because like that's the only way that we can make it in some spaces. Like people don't want to listen to us.
I think in a lot of ways, societally, we're not really viewed to look at a woman and to see the combat experience. It's just something that's completely incongruent with like our thought and how we think. So yeah, I know that we've had some guest speakers on here before, and they talk about like the bullshit that females deal with, like trying to go get basic supplies if you're dealing with like housing issues, and like the only thing you can find is like size 14 tube socks and like men's deodorant and like freaking extra large underwear. It's like you just never think about that stuff. You never understand that there's just like no real provision. There's no real awareness for the need within the community. So no, just glad to provide an opportunity for you to share your experience.
No, thank you. And one thing, sorry, pregnancy brain. Oh my God. Oh yeah, being a woman is interesting in the VA. Like, oh, I remember disability when it comes to PTSD. I was assaulted in the military, but that was one little moment in my life. I was in for 14 years. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan for 4 years. The only thing that I have PTSD listed for is for sexual assault. Like, what a bitch slap to my service, to the people I lost, to everything. They don't look at, I think I just had my first female evaluator to try and up my percentage ever. Like this week is the first time it ever happened to me. And she actually asked me questions that were specific to being like a woman or a mother and the way we specifically experience PTSD. That had never happened before for me. But I know plenty of other women that their PTSD is slotted as for MST, despite the years of combat experience they have, as if that's the only thing that we are. We were just like raped. Like, okay, that's cool. Like, why do you guys focus on that so much? Like, I'm not even focusing on it that much. So that's really weird. And I wish the VA would fix that.
Yeah, I'm sorry you've had to deal with that. I mean, I don't know what it is with the VA right now, but things just seem to be tough all over. I was advocating for a vet a few weeks ago with a psychologist up at the Long Beach VA, and explaining that he had a friend who died in Iraq, and she was trying to explain to me how it wasn't a PTSD related issue, it was post-traumatic grief. And I'm just sitting here like having been like really aware of the criteria the VA provides for PTSD, and it's like, you're just making this up. This isn't realistic. You know what I mean? You're just kind of throwing something at what you believe to be a layman and expecting me to go away.
If that's like, that's insane. That's insane. Someone that died while this person was overseas. So like when their life and their
they were
nervous
deployed
system,
together, kind of a best friend, daily contact, kind of a thing. Then all of a sudden you're just gone. You know, just a lot of people's reality. It's hard to deal with, you know, but apparently that's PTSD, post-traumatic grief. So it was a frustrating conversation. It kind of made me want to start a letter writing campaign to Katie Porter. I've never felt inspired before.
Hey, when I think that's the one ticket and the one like thing that we have more than any other communities when it comes to fighting for this stuff. Like we don't want to see this happen to other people. And I don't have to know you to not want it to happen to you, because what happens to you happens to me and happens to my buddies. And like we got each other's backs when it comes to this space. Like we don't want other people to suffer. So I mean, aside from that, and all of our tactical abilities. Like, that's why we're making moves and we're getting legislation passed federally.
I wonder if we're not watching a bit of a cultural evolution, because when I look back 20 years ago, I don't feel like that was the common spirit of society. You know what I mean? That they were more than okay watching people suffer. But something about where we're at right now, it seems like there's a little bit of indignation about like the systemic suffering. Everybody seems to be okay watching while watching Netflix in the background. And it's just not
Yeah.
okay. It's getting old.
Yeah. I think everybody's like, they're all burnt out at this point. Like, something's got to give. Something has to change.
Yeah, burnt out and like desensitized, and it just doesn't leave that much room for empathy. Mm.
Absolutely.
Well, so I'm wondering, do you do any work with the traditional medicines? I mean, do you collaborate with any therapists or anything like that, or are you able to connect
I
veterans with services?
yeah, yeah, definitely. So like we have like communities and people all around, and if I don't know somebody, I know enough people that I can find you a connection um with somebody that I actually know isn't going to hurt you, because there is a lot, not like hurt, sorry, like I'm not really picky about who I send people to. Like, I know I've been in this community for 20 years, both in the veteran and the psychedelic space. Because I'm really particular about who I send people to. So if ever I'm sending people in spaces, like, I know they've been vetted. I know that they're not like predatory, or that they think that they're Jesus or something, because like that's a huge problem. And no, I sit with people, but I generally, like, I have a big family and I'm the person that does this stuff for my family. So like I keep a lot of what I do close right now. Also, like, doing all of this, I chose to not sit with people while we're doing this initiative, um and just really focus any of my medicine space on this. I think I'll probably start sitting with people again and like I make teas for people, especially like for addicts. So we put like less than 600 milligrams in a mix full of tea, and like you're not going to overuse it, and it can help you get off stuff like methadone and alcohol if we can keep people. So that's what I do outside of a lot of stuff, but I do generally just do that stuff for my family, but I do have people to send people to.
Well, I'm wondering about Hippie and a veteran and your organization. I mean, obviously laws are changing. We're kind of in a liminal space right now regarding legality. As far as future plans, is kind of facilitating or hosting. Is that a plan that you have for the future?
Yes, I would absolutely love to, just because I have such a wealth of people around me. Like right now, I own a 14-acre conservation forest. I initially thought about bringing people and having stuff done out here, but I think we're gonna find a different place to live. It's like up on a hill. And then there's a railroad, and like I feel like that can just scare people a lot. So I want to find a space that has a little more quiet and seclusion, because the last bill that was presented by Senator Salomon was the veterans bill. It wasn't the greatest. It was a minimal bill. It needs more, like a lot, to include decriminalization specifically, explicitly for nonprofits, if it's a veteran nonprofit bill. But at that point, and in our initiative, it will allow for nonprofits only to raise funds for entheogens. There is no selling of entheogens in our initiative, period, unless it's for organizations and communities that are actually like giving the money back to other people. So I do plan on doing stuff in the future, but just waiting until we can do it through the nonprofit, and in that space, because I also don't really believe in, I don't like, not having sales on entheogens is like tactically smart, but that's actually a personal belief of mine. Like, I don't, if I'm going to sit with you, like, I don't want there to be a money exchange between us. I think it changes and muddies the situation. Like, you can like, so I'm weird about exchange of money and stuff when it comes to this. So that's why I like having a nonprofit, because it is spiritual for me, but also medically, because I'm a medic. So, but I like keeping it in that space and not sales.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about just like the different bills and stuff. Brian and I, before starting this up today, we were just having a conversation about how sometimes a lot of these bills and acts that get passed, they're actually kind of upside down as far as like their labeling and like what they're actually trying to do and like push. And it's just like an advertising. It's just a opportunity for advertisement. But as far as as far as like you providing some type of psychedelic services and stuff with your space, to be honest, it feels like it's just like a matter of time, because you mentioned Zach Skiles, and I'm familiar that he's with working with the Snap Lab at the Portland VA, doing that work. And it's like, from last I heard, their results have been just positive all around. And so no doubt, just as time goes on, there's going to be more word, and we're going to be seeing well, I think we've already kind of been seeing a reversal of stigma, but it's going to be a little bit more it's going to be projected a little bit more broadly to people that are not really in the know or really thinking about this stuff, and bringing it to their attention. Because once we start getting people that don't really have their head involved in just like being updated on studies like this, when we start seeing the efficacy kind of shared and people starting having that realization, I feel like the barriers are going to start to deteriorate a little bit more quickly. And from what I understand, I think it looks like we're anticipating some FDA approval for psilocybin MDMA clinics sometime this summer.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a matter of time. There's a lot to hope for. But then again, like I just said about like the labeling of acts and in different bills, it's like we gotta just stay vigilant and to make sure that the way that the system handles these processes is going to be in a way that does actually benefit people in the end, instead of just an unnecessary, unfortunate taking advantage of someone along the way. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's why, I mean, the way we wrote our initiative in the state is like really like we see the exploitation. We've been in these communities for 20 years. A lot of the people that we're doing the initiative with, like, we've been here, done that. Like, we came here being club kids. Like, we had to get our drugs from random people out of their pockets, like when we first started this, and we somehow survived. But we know how to navigate these spaces. And so I hope that like a majority of that knowledge and understanding of the psychedelic community is really understood in our initiative, because that's what it is. We're like, how do we protect people the most by sitting with people, but also allowing you to sit with whoever the hell you want to sit with? Like, it's not the government's job to decide who you do something that can technically be labeled as spiritual. It's such a bleh. But when it comes to like legalization efforts, like, I'm not against them, and I will work on them. I absolutely will. But in the meantime, there are people that cannot wait, and we need access now. And like, we're going to get them access if people come across our path. We're all of us veterans. We are like, we're not going to like turn people down. We are the most open and sharing people that are around when it comes to this stuff, because we're like, fuck this. We wore this flag. We're going to do what we want, and we're going to save our buddies. And I'm thankful. And I'm thankful to be a part of that and see so many other veterans doing that, because we don't have time. So
I think
Well, it's a daily thing, right?
yeah.
I think you raise a really good point there. This is something that gets overlooked with veterans a lot, is at the core, like, we all made a decision to serve. And so that makes us people of service, and if you can strip away the unnecessary violence and kind of get down to the core of the desire to serve, I think you've got a pretty motivated, active class of people out there that can affect some change. So I definitely feel you there.
Totally. I mean, I hope that if more than anything, the stuff that I push out on the internet, people may not understand it or understand me or where I'm coming from. I'm just trying to motivate more people like me. I can't do all this alone. I don't want to do everybody's state. I want other people to go do their states. And I want more veterans to hop on this, because when we do this, like, the amount of people that I know active duty or veteran status that started doing all this stuff because they saw me, one of their medics, talking about it, being safe about it, fighting for their rights to do this. Like that's mental health care. Like that is reaching people that are unreachable, that aren't ever even going to go to the damn VA. So like we need more veterans stepping up in more states. And like I really, really, really hope that we can all really motivate those people by being out and open and talking about all this.
I think the big part is the research that's catching up. I know for myself, being able to read, number one, like government white papers about, various research, but also just prevailing research right now, the current stuff that's coming out. It's doing a really good job explaining like what's physiologically happening in the body in response to these entheogens, the way that it's affecting like the 5-HT2A receptors, turning on TRKB genes, and just absolutely like, I was reading a paper, it talks about like there being 1,000-fold increase in the antidepressant effect of psilocybin and psychedelics, the classics, compared to SSRIs and SNRIs. And that's just such a massive jump. Like, I just don't think we can, intellectually comprehend like what a huge difference it is. So the research is catching up to the point where the mind is going to have a really hard time like dealing with the cognitive dissonance of saying, oh, this doesn't work.
Did you see that there was like a study, I don't know, like done back in October or something that was published? And I feel like people didn't read it all the way through. And they didn't point on the one thing that I noticed, but I think it's because I'm both medical and patient. And I don't know. But it was that the people that in the study that were on SSRIs and the people that were not, despite the fact that the people that were on SSRIs, they did not have as amazing of an experience or any experience at all. Both populations experienced the same long-term mental health relief. So I thought that was really special and amazing. And I feel like more people need to see that. And like, I do love the research coming out because it makes me so happy because it proves stuff I already knew. Because I've been on mental health medications and done psychedelics and still had the same relief. And I know it's not a placebo. I know it's real life. Like when my body feels different. But no, I saw that one and I thought that was really, really cool because the amount of people we have that are on stuff.
Well, and I think like placebo pick up negative connotations is because it has an effect on our ability to determine what average best treatments are. You know what I mean? And so really when we talk about placebo, we're talking about like the effect of belief. And if somebody's able to affect their body and how it, interacts with themselves based on belief, that's a pretty interesting observation. But once again, we go back to the whole idea. There's no real research behind that. How do you charge someone for believing they can get better?
Right.
Yeah, and you were saying that like instead of, because from what I understand, when speaking with someone about psychedelics that is like looking for some just a different opportunity for mental health practice, people will say like, okay, like taper off of your SSRIs. You're saying that like at the end of the day they're getting similar effects without that barrier of like having to wait like a month or two of just without medication and kind of just having to sit in that.
So I have a protocol a protocol specifically paired with SGBs, but I also just have a microdosing protocol. And people be like, it doesn't work. Bullshit. I've been doing it for years. And I've worked with lots of people, methadone, SSRIs, on all the drugs, people on, the 10 things the VA is going to give you, gabapentin and all that shit. And I microdose them sometimes people actually really can only take like 10 little milligrams before they get too tired. Because you don't need a lot of psilocybin to be effective in this way. You can take it over the course of every day instead of doing it like every few days. But if you do it past a certain amount, it's not going to be effective. But it's not effective in the way that you feel it. Just because you don't feel it doesn't mean it's not working. So like we have people between 20 and 60 milligrams generally, to include people that are on methadone, and they're able to titrate off of their medications just fine. And like we don't even set like parameters. I'm just like, when you're ready to start titrating, it's all on you. Don't do everything all at once. You go after the worst things first. Benzos, get off of those first. Those are the worst things. Those are the one things that can actually kill you. So we titrate off benzos first and then go down the line of what people are comfortable with. and it's all patient led, has not like it's which microdosing is in general. But people can also do like the, every few days they do 100, whatever, however much people do. But either way, these things in small amounts, just because you don't feel it doesn't mean that it's not working. Same thing if you're on an SSRI. Just because you don't feel high, just because you don't feel a trip, doesn't mean your body's not getting that medicine and being like, oh, I can naturally produce our serotonin. Let's do this. It's just that it's not what we expected or what we expected to feel. But long term, we're seeing the benefits. So it's great to see a study that can do something like that, because it's going more so to prove our protocol, which people generally really are like, that doesn't work. And I'm like, well, people not taking methadone anymore would disagree with you.
When we had first brought you on, I was very excited about hearing about your experience as a female veteran. Thank you so much for sharing, but was intrigued to find out how active you are in legislation and pushing for advocacy for this stuff. And I'm wondering if you might be able to take some of this time and talk a little bit about maybe what's going on in 2024, what's happened in 2023. I know we talked a little bit about how the California bill got shot down, but I really do feel like if we could get entrenched on the coast and have it be legal in California, Washington, and Oregon, it is just a matter of time before it literally rolls out like a blanket across the US. So I'm wondering if you might be able to kind of speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. So I was involved with the coalition for SB 58. I'm also sitting in on the coalition for the one that has replaced it now. Absolute and utter disappointment. We went out there, we sent letters, had, I get my family all over California to send out stuff from different counties, veterans, reaching out. That SB 58 passed through both chambers, and then the governor on his very own, in opposition of the people elected by the state, by the people, to veto a decriminalization bill that was only individual decriminalization. That's it. Just that you're not going to arrest people for holding some damn mushrooms. And he vetoed that. So I'm on the fuck Gavin Newsom train now. But where they replaced it with a legalization therapy, a therapeutic model, has absolutely no decriminalization in it at all. However, in California, there is the Cognitive Freedom Initiative that is done by, I think, like some of the folks out of Oakland for the state, which will be a decriminalization initiative similar to like ours, but it's a little different, because every state's going to write their own legislation or their own initiatives. But that's with like Oakland Hi-Fi and I think Rev. I don't know what his name is. Rev Human something. I see his name pop up on my stuff all the time, that I've never actually talked to him in person, so I don't remember what his name is. But they're doing an initiative there. Here in Washington State, there was a psilocybin services bill that got gutted thanks to our governor, also Governor Jay Inslee, decided to gut and wouldn't pass through, told their little people down there, well, gotta gut it, turn it into another working group. 2 years in a row, we got 2 working groups. Millions of dollars spent just to study the exact same thing 2 years in a row. Absolute waste of taxpayer funds. But because that's not working, again, there's other legalization attempts in the state from initiatives, we decided to charge forward with a full statewide decriminalization initiative. And we just published our final draft for community feedback, because we let the community give feedback on our legislation, because this is for the people. It's not just about us. So we're in that process, and we'll be submitting it maybe the next month to process through the Secretary of State, see what they do. I don't know if we're going to get on the ballot this year. Fingers crossed. But if not, we are going to do it next year. We're not going to stop until the state's decriminalized here in Washington. And then federally, I think the most important thing, the thing I think is probably one of the best models that they could have been going with on the federal level for psychedelics. They're not going to decriminalize psychedelics federally. That's not happening right now. But what we can do right now is fix the scheduling system, which I think was a really smart way to go about this. So it doesn't really scare all the other people, but also changes a lot of the issues within the system now, so that medications, plants, or whatever that's in Schedule 1, if they've been given something like a breakthrough therapies designation like MDMA and psilocybin are, they're not held hostage in Schedule 1 by the DEA, because that's what's happening right now. We have all the research, all the work, the paperwork, the legal fights, everything. We got doctors out here suing the DEA, and they're continuing to push back, they don't have to provide any information. They don't have to justify why they're not going to let people have psilocybin despite it being safer than all the other options. So the Breakthrough Therapies Act, which is a bipartisan effort between Cory Booker and Rand Paul, and also has all bipartisan support so far, because that's like kind of our goal, like bringing all the little babies together, make them sit at the table and get along. But it will change the way the scheduling system is, so that the DEA isn't that gate, because the DEA doesn't want to be that gate, but they're going to be the gate until they're released of that liability. So the DEA actually reviewed the Breakthrough Therapies Act and actually agreed with it, which is crazy. And crazy that, you know, you're not seeing a lot more about this all up in the news. I think it definitely needs way more highlight, but so be it. But if that bill passes, that will change the way the scheduling system works, and it'll make it more malleable so things can actually move around the way it should have been to begin with, instead of, you know, government agencies being able to just say no because they want to say no. But I think those are kind of the biggest important things going on right now.
When it's funny you mentioned the news not covering this. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about how pharmaceutical companies do an immense amount of advertising, not for the purposes of advertising their product, but for the purposes of controlling the advertising dollars that go in and out of the news agencies, depending on what they report. So I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Well, you think about those two instances where either like, oh, mushrooms and psychosis. We got, you know, the gorge shooting and an airplane dude. And it's like, there's so many other factors in that situation. Like, can we point to the fact that this was like a hate crime, or like that this dude maimed his girlfriend and was smart enough to shoot her in the foot and shoot stuff with a handgun at like perfect target ranges? Like, there's so many other things that go into all of this. And then you see in the news, like the Seattle Times writing, blah, people going crazy on mushrooms, or sensationalized. It's just, and it's funded by these people making money, by the pharmaceutical industry. They even send people, the pharmaceutical industry sends people into all these bills and all these initiatives, or the bills that are going up to these committees to fight against them. It's like
trying to produce a poison pill. We had a doctor on who has a SGB and ketamine facility down in Southern California, and he was explaining that the Johnson & Johnson nasal spray that's FDA approved, from his perspective, has higher degrees of suicidal ideation than any other form of ketamine, which I think is kind of interesting, that they would be putting out a product that creates suicidal ideation rather than the potential treatment or recovery from trauma that the patient would be sitting out for.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But really, I'm not a big fan of ketamine. It's never been my drug of choice in general, party wise. But I see plenty of people that get a lot of relief from it. I'm interested to see what it feels like for chronic pain relief. So after I have the baby, I want to try a round of ketamine just to see what it feels like. I was told it's like MDMA without the emotions. I'm a big fan of MDMA and I like my emotions, so I think maybe that might have also been why I wasn't so drawn to it.
It's a fully synthetic substance, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
it is. And I'm cool with that being. I want to make sure that if it is like, our bill does not, our initiative here in our state specifically does not include any any synthetic forms of anything, and no synthetic forms of extraction on entheogens either. So like we are literally decriminalizing natural products and processes. But as somebody that MDMA was the first psychedelic I ever had when I was like 16. I went to like a rave or something and it changed my life. And I was like, wow, this is so cool.
It shares
But,
characteristics with DMT too, because both are serotonin agonists, and that's
yeah.
something that doesn't get discussed often enough either. Just the relationship between serotonin and existing mental health problems.
Yeah, I just if it's gonna be synthetic, I do want it made properly. I do want to make sure that it's good because I've had really bad ecstasy. I've had bad drugs before, and I've seen people die for bad drugs. So when it comes to synthetics, please, pharmaceuticals, do your thing. Get me some good MDMA. Get me good Molly, and I'll be happy. You guys do that thing. I'm happy for them to do that, but I don't know about ketamine is interesting because I also see that that does run some risk of dependency, whereas all these other things don't run it like that. Because like have already seen people abuse ketamine regularly, which I think is also my hard pass with getting past like recommending ketamine. However, the VA has a national directive on ketamine.
Yeah.
They are supposed to send people, if you have treatment resistant, you are supposed to be allowed to go to a community care provider that provides ketamine. But I'm not seeing it.
It's an incredibly restrictive program to get into. I was talking to them last time I was out there, and basically you have to have tried at least 2 different medications and had those fail, and then you need to piss clean on all your tests. So if you're using cannabis or anything to supplement, you're out of the program. So yeah, it's a very high bar for entrance. Yeah, I wonder how many people would be interested in engaging in that with that high bar.
That's just insane though. Like no one's gonna get hurt. Ketamine's not gonna hurt you if you were taking other things. And like how many people we're kicking the people out that are medicating that need help the most. And those are the people that we're not reaching because of those parameters.
It seems to be characteristic of the VA rather than DOD or the medical provider that's care that's provided for active duty. From what I understand, a lot of people are having a much easier time getting ketamine treatments while they're active duty, and then when they get out, they're finding it near impossible to get treatments through the VA.
SGBs too. A lot of MTFs are doing SGBs specifically for PTSD. Like they know it. I honestly think they just don't know how to handle the volume. And because of that, we're not going to have access as Tesla. My ride or die right there. Best trip sitter in the world. Only one I need. But yeah, no, ketamine, it's interesting because like it's there. We can send people to get it. And so many ketamine providers do SGBs. It's like, oh, everything's connected.
I was thinking maybe we wrap it up, but I wanted to touch base and ask if there was anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't cover already.
I don't think so. I don't know. I talked a lot about
Yeah, we did.
stuff.
Brian or Steve?
I'm grateful for all the information on the upcoming legislation and things that are going on. I'd love to stay plugged in and just kind of hear more about what's happening a few months down the road.
Totally. I'd be happy to come back or just have a call with you guys or do whatever and just let you know what's going on. That's all I do. I'm making babies and doing this stuff. So
changing the world.
You do have an absolutely amazing amount of information, and you know how to bring it across, and your experience is amazing. So I frankly, with the name of Hippie and a veteran, I wasn't expecting much. I just be very honest with you, and you do have an amazing. I hope you will come back, and I had never heard of you, and what you're doing is obviously important, and the manner in which you approach it is just so impressive. So I'm talking behind your back and in front of you.
Thank you. You know, I think I love that you said that. I know most people do not expect me when you're doing the Hippie and a Veteran. They see that Hippie and a Veteran is our Instagram that me and my husband started for adventures. He's the hippie. I'm the veteran. We just do hippie like things. But I also think like there are so many different people that get labeled hippie. Hippie was also what they first called me because I talked about cannabis when I joined the military all the time. Talk to like any of my soldiers. I'm like, when you're out, go smoke some weed. I'm like, when you come across psychedelics, just make sure you have 3 days afterwards. You're good. Helping people like stay off of getting popped on UAs is like one of my favorite things. But yeah, most people don't expect that. They expect me to come out here being like peace and love and in all these fancy colors, and I generally just wear black and white all the time. I think my earrings and my lipstick is probably the most colorful I generally get. But my husband, he's the colorful one. But he's not a veteran, so but I like it that it also like applies to so many different people.
About 10 years ago, I was finally diagnosed, had my entire life. I'm 76 now. My entire life, no one diagnosed PTSD. I didn't have the classical symptoms. And so about 10 years ago, I told my therapist of many, many years that I'm going to stop seeing him because I'm not getting what I want. And so she went and did some research, came back and said, you have PTSD. Well, I had already done everything except EMDR. There was the standard. And so we did that, no effect. And so I looked on the internet, now that I knew what it was, found a Reddit site that was, I'd never been on Reddit, didn't even know what it was, that was MDMA therapy. So I started doing a lot more research. Anyway, to get through the blah, blah, blah part. So I read the MAPS manual, put together with two therapists, just like the MAPS manual. I was lucky, really lucky to find someone who did, because someone knew someone, who did that and was willing to do that. And I had to find a drug for myself, as this person did. And so that was like, anyway, after 7 sessions of MDMA, I was free of PTSD. It's what I wanted. I pointed, that's the peak. I want to reach that. And I did. And lots of other things. And what you're doing is, well, yeah. The one thing I didn't the one thing I didn't expect was right behind that peak was another one. It was doing things for me, my self-love. I still haven't conquered that part. So, but I got rid of the PTSD, and I can live amongst people and not sweat and worry.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. So that was the MDMA, and I've done all other things.
See, you're a hippie and a veteran too.
Yeah, I guess so then. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
welcome.
So
I really appreciate what you're doing. Really, really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you again, Lauren, for joining us today. For people that are going to be watching this on YouTube, if you'd like to join us live for our next event, make sure to check out our Meetup page. I'll leave a link for that, and check out the calendar to see what we have coming up planned. But yeah, we meet on the 3rd Sunday every month at 11 a.m. But with that, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, everyone.